Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to the Langley School District regular meeting of the Board of Education. The audio-visual recording and webcasting of our regular board meeting, those in attendance were informed that as per policy number 7, regular and special meetings of the board may be streamed live, archived, and accessed online. The board reserves as its sole discretion via motion at any meeting the right to not stream or archive a meeting or a portion of a meeting. Further, the board reserves the right to edit any recorded portion of a meeting. I'd like to call tonight's meeting to order. The board will start our meeting at 7 p.m. and begin the meeting with the introduction of our First Nations traditional welcome. I'd like to acknowledge that the Langley School District is located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Matsqui, Kwantlen, Katzie, and Semiahmoo First Nations. We gather here tonight in understanding of the importance of Yayastol, Skekiayos, working together and not somewhat, Letsamot, uniting ourselves with one heart, one mind, to ensure that we support and inspire all learners to reach their full potential. I'd like to welcome everyone that's here tonight, and I'd like to start with our partner groups. And I'd like to recognize that QP 1851 President, Human Anasori, is here. Tanya Kerr, the LPA President. Alicia Rempel, DPAC President. And also Jeremy Linden is the LPVPA President. George Kozalek is our district principal with the school board office, and he is here tonight as well. Our staff present with us, starting with Dale Vo, our technical support specialist 3, and Paul Bobeo, technical support specialist number 1. Judy Swanson, executive assistant. Joanne Abshire, communications manager. Barry Bunyan, assistant superintendent. Shen Chan, assistant secretary treasurer. Mel Gill, deputy superintendent. Woody Bradford, assistant superintendent. Brian Isley, secretary treasurer, and also Gordon Stewart, our superintendent. Trustees that are here with us tonight, Charlie Fox, and then we have Marnie Wilson, Tony Ward, Suzanne Perot, and also Shelley Coburn is attending virtually and is not able to attend with us tonight other than virtually, so she is here virtually. And also we have David Todd, our vice chair, and myself, Rod Ross. I am the chair of the Langley School Board. Our report from in-camera, I'd like to ask our vice chair to present this at this time.
Thank you. At our in-camera meeting, we discussed legal and personnel.
And I'd like to report on another couple of meetings that we've had previously. I would like to report that the special in-camera meeting of October 26 pertained to personal and legal. The Board of Education also passed a motion to release the following motions at the regular board meeting tonight. Number 1, although the board's position is that this is a matter of the provincial health officer, we know the issue of mandatory vaccination requirement for employees is of great interest to our community. As this matter has labor relations implications, the board discussions are more appropriately dealt with in camera. 2, that the Langley Board of Education requests staff to undertake a feasibility study as soon as practicable with respect to the Langley School District staff vaccine mandate. And then I'd like to report about the special in-camera meeting on November 9th we just recently had, pertained to personnel and legal. The Board of Education also passed a motion to release the following motion at the regular board meeting tonight. That the Board of Education will not mandate COVID-19 vaccinations for Langley School District staff. Thank you very much. On to number 4 is a nomination and election of vice chair. Before we get into that, I just want to say how much we appreciated your service in this role, Trustee Todd. And as per policy number 7, nominations for vice person will be done by ballot. Secretary Treasurer Isley will hand out ballots for trustees to provide nominations for the position of vice chairperson of the board. Trustee Coburn, she may be able to text the Secretary Treasurer her choice for nominations. Secretary Treasurer Isley will read out the nominations, and the chairperson will ask the trustees if they will allow their name to stand.
I'd like to report that we have 2 nominations from trustees, Trustee Marnie Wilson and Trustee Charlie Fox.
Thank you, Secretary Treasurer Isley. I would like to know if both those trustees would respond with a yes or a no. Would Marnie Wilson, would you let me know if you would like to let your name stand, please, at this time? Okay, thank you very much. And Charlie Fox.
With thanks to my nominators, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. That means we will proceed with an election. We have 2 nominations for the position of Vice Chair of the Board, and an election will be conducted. Trustees will be each provided with a ballot. Trustee Coburn, if I could please direct you to have yours your vote sent to Deputy Superintendent Mal Gill, please. Assistant Superintendents Woody Bradford and Mal Gill will act as scrutineers. Mal Gill will collect the ballots. Now, Mal Gill and Barry Bunyan will leave the room to count the ballots. And we'll give them a few minutes and they will return in a moment and I will announce the results of the election. And thank you very much. On the vote for the Vice Chair, I'd like to please welcome Marnie Wilson to the position of Vice Chair. Congratulations. Well done. I will now, due to the impacts of COVID-19, everyone will remain in their current seats throughout the election. A motion to destroy the ballots is now required, so I'd like a mover and a seconder. Moved by Charlie Fox, seconded by Marnie Wilson, that the text message as well and the ballots for election of the vice chair be destroyed. All those in favor, please. And it is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. All right, thank you. Back to our meeting. I'd like to move the consent agenda at this time, that the Board of Education adopts the consent agenda as provided. Can I move her for the consent agenda? David Todd, and seconded by Charlie Fox. Thank you. All right, all those in favor? And it's carried unanimously as well. Thank you very much. All right, in consideration of tonight's agenda, the agenda be approved as presented. I need a mover for tonight's agenda, please. Suzanne Perot, moved by, and seconded by David Todd. Thank you very much. And all those in favor of the agenda? Okay, thank you. It's carried unanimously as well. And now on to the superintendent's report, 7.1, draft reporting order and communicating student learning. Over to you, superintendent.
Thank you, Chair Ross. And at this point, we'll be joined by District Principal of Instructional Services, George Kozovic. And George's going to take some time to walk people through the communicating student learning piece. And there is a new reporting order that is coming into effect for September. We're already started down this path. And we get a lot of questions from parents, and I'm sure you as trustees will have questions also. You're hearing a move K to 9 away from letter grades and percents, and lots of in terms of research around why that is something that is good for kids. 10, 11, 12 still work to do there, but at the same time, again, we get lots of questions in terms of how we assess kids, and then what are we going to do with something that's referred to as proficiency levels? What do these things mean? These 4 different levels. Some people try to translate those into letter grades. That's not the intent. But I think we're also trying to make sure that we have a document that students and parents can understand, that they participate in the process in terms of the assessment piece, and also again they don't have to go through numerous pages and at the end of it come out saying I'm not even sure where my child's at. So I can assure you that we're doing a lot of work. George has also been joined by a Director of Instructional Services, Don Tomlinson, and others. They've put on some evenings for folks to walk them through this. And George certainly was a leader in terms of as a principal at Bcpsea. A lot of work he did there, so well versed in it. And it's going to take some time to kind of walk you through what you can expect. Hopefully be able to give you a good solid understanding as trustees when you get these questions, but going forward, and really looking forward to the presentation tonight. And over to you, George.
Okay, thanks. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me. As Gord mentioned, so my purpose tonight is to provide an update to the Board of Education on our district's current plan around communicating student learning, so what we're currently doing, and also how it relates to what was recently released, the draft reporting order from the Ministry of Education. And I'll touch on both of those tonight. Make sure this actually works. There we go. So as you can see, this is our, oops, no, I did something too far. Again. There we go. So as you can see, this is our goal in our district. The goal that we've developed in instructional services, working with Donna as our Director of Instruction, is to develop a communicating student learning plan that is meaningful for all. And when we say all, we mean teachers, parents, and students. And we also want our communicating student learning plan to properly align with what the Ministry of Education is doing around communicating student learning. So we have had a reporting order since about 2016. That was the most recent reporting order. And in that reporting order, it provided districts with lots of flexibility to explore different models of communicating student learning. And that led many districts, including Langley, to pilot some different options to try and determine what were the best practices. And that was all done in anticipation of what we were all expecting was a new reporting order that would actually provide some direction for all districts moving forward. So what you see there is actually the new reporting order, which has now been released. It was released officially at the beginning of October, and it was open for feedback to the public. That feedback closed on November 5th, so that feedback was open to teachers, parents, students, administrators, and was shared out throughout the district by the LTA, by us, to all different partner groups to sort of provide feedback on the reporting order. And now what the ministry is doing is they are taking that feedback that they've received, and they will be releasing a new reporting order. They've told us it will be coming out in January. And the plan is that that new reporting order will become fully implemented and go into place starting in September of 2022. So in time for our next school year. So that's the timeline. What I thought, or we thought would be helpful for you, was to tell you a little bit about what's similar to the new reporting order, what we compared to what we used to have, and then talk a little bit about what's different. So what you can see there is what's similar. What hasn't changed is that the expectation is that there will still be a minimum of 5 reports during the school year. So that was in the old reporting order. That will continue to be. 2 of those will be written learning updates. So the one thing that has changed is the language from a written report or a formal report to a learning update. And then 1 will be a final summary of learning provided at the end of the year. Not a lot different than what we currently do, just a little bit of language change. And then the other thing that hasn't changed is that for the written learning updates, it is still expected that students will be provided with comments about how they're progressing in their learning, including descriptive feedback for each of the subject areas that they are studying. So that has not changed. What has changed is a number of different things. So first of all, one of the biggest changes is that prior to this new reporting order, there were actually 3 different policy options when it came to reporting. Elementary was different, and secondary was different, and it was also different in terms of how we reported around students with diverse abilities and disabilities. And so the big change is now we have 1 K-12 reporting order that applies to all students in the system. So there's some consistency there, and I'll talk more about that as we go. The other thing is, Gord mentioned the proficiency scales. Well, under the old reporting order, there were 17 different versions of proficiency scales around the province that use different language. So those have all been eliminated, and there is now 1 standard proficiency scale that is being used province-wide. And that is the proficiency scale that we have been using in Langley for the last couple of years anyways. A couple other differences, you'll see that there used to be no timing requirement for the first report. There now is a requirement that the first report is done within the first 25% of instructional time in a school year. The other thing that's changed is that in the old reporting order, the students were required to assess core competencies from K to 9. That has now been extended to K to 12. So all students K to 12 will be doing a self-assessment of core competencies every reporting period, not just at the end of the year. And the other one that's new, in the old reporting order, there was nothing around goal setting. And now it is going to be a requirement in the new reporting order that students will be asked to set goals K to 12 each term across the year. And a couple other differences, as I've already mentioned, we used to have different reporting requirements for students with diverse abilities. Those are now removed, and inclusive education reporting requirements are actually aligned with the regular reporting order for all students. And lastly, the only real difference, previously we used to have many differences between what we did at K to 9 versus 10 to 12. And now the only difference that exists between those 2 is that letter grades and percentages will remain for grade 10 to 12. And I'll address that in a little bit as well. The other thing I mentioned, sort of the difference between a learning update and a summary of learning. So that's just some language change, that the learning updates are learning updates that happen during the course of the year. The requirement is there needs to be 4 of them per year. 2 of them need to be written. And again, that's not much different than what we already did. And at the end of the year, all students will receive a summary of learning. The other thing that you'll notice between the 2 is that in the learning update, the report will cover subject areas that are currently being studied at that particular time. Whereas at the end of the year, the final summary of learning will cover everything that's been covered during the school year. So where that becomes important is elementary. So for example, in our elementary schools, especially at the younger grades, especially at the beginning of the year, teachers don't necessarily do much other than literacy and numeracy. And prior to that, some teachers don't get to the social studies and the science until second term. And before they were required to report, even though they hadn't covered it. So now it gives them a bit of flexibility. If they don't get to that first term, they don't have to report on it first term if they haven't covered it. There's no sense in reporting on something that they actually haven't covered, but they are required to report on it when they do cover it, and they are required to report on it when they get to the end of the year. So that's important. And then most of the other things I've already kind of already mentioned around proficiency scales and those types of things. So the other piece is just to address the proficiency scales. As mentioned earlier in the key differences, prior to this reporting order, there were 17 different versions of this out there. Some were 4-point scales, some were 5-point scales, some were 4-point scales with different language. This is now the scale that will be used across the province. And as I mentioned, this is the scale that we have been using here in Langley for the last couple of years. So we're aligned with that, which is great. The language there is emerging, developing, proficient, and extending. And so one of the questions is, why are we shifting to proficiency scales? Why are we moving away from letter grades? As you already know, letter grades have not been around at K to 3 for a number of years. And now this is just extending that for grades 4 to 9. And basically the explanation is there. The focus moving away from letter grades really focuses on learning as being a continuous process. We're really talking about looking at student growth in terms of seeing where they're at and helping them figure out where they want to go. And what proficiencies allow for that growth mindset. I'm not getting labeled that I'm a C or a B student or I'm a failing student. I'm at this level, I'm developing in my progress. And the important part of that is working with those students and saying, here's what you need to improve on in order to continue to grow. So it really becomes a growth mindset, focus on student growth, and also allowing students to reflect and set goals so that they can actually take ownership of their own learning. And the real piece is that last line in sort of fostering that hope and efficacy in students, that they still believe they have an opportunity to grow and improve, where sometimes letter grades, and I'll refer to this in a little bit towards the end of my presentation, where it sort of can become a bit defeatist, where they feel like I can't, I'm always going to be a C student. I'm not necessarily going to be able to grow beyond that, or I get labeled in that particular way. So that's where the idea behind the proficiency scales comes. Another important piece that many parents will have questions about, that you might get asked, is about the whole question of, well, what does it actually mean to be emerging? And how do students fit in on this? And what about a student who's struggling in their learning? So one of the important things that the ministry has been really clear about in the reporting order is that every single student needs to find a place on that scale. So there is no other place on that scale other than one piece, which I'll talk about, which is a little bit different. But any student who's in that classroom, they are somewhere on that scale. So what that means is a student at the emerging level, they could be at the lower end of grade level expectations, and some of those will be at grade level expectations. So that is one of the big questions, like what happens to a student who's maybe not meeting grade level expectations? And so the important thing is there then that what are we doing within our schools to actually provide support? What interventions are we doing to help that student who is stuck at the emerging level? So it's no longer that, well, we're just going to give you an F and we're not going to worry about you. We actually need to be talking about, hey, what are we going to do to help that student move along and move up the scale? What are the interventions at the school level, in the classroom, to help that student grow and become a learner who can become successful? So it really creates a bit of a different mind shift and focus around learning than perhaps we've seen sometimes in the past. The other piece that I mentioned, student goal setting. So students are now going to be asked to generate goals at the end of each term. And again, that fits nicely in with the proficiencies. Where am I at? What do I need to do in order to improve? And how am I going to get there? And so figuring out, one of the things we're going to need to figure out is how we're going to incorporate that into our reporting. So that's a challenge for our department to figure out how that's going to actually take place. And as you can see, it needs to be included in at least 2 of the written learning updates and also at the end of the year. So students not only will be setting goals throughout the year, but then when they get to the end of the year, they'll also be setting a goal as they're moving forward into the following year. I did mention also earlier when I was talking about the proficiency, there is one other option for those students when I was talking about the fitting on the scale. So what the ministry has included is a category called IE. In the past, some of you may have heard of incomplete. This is not incomplete. This is very different. This is very specific around insufficient evidence of learning. And so these are not used for students who are struggling. These are used for situations where we have students, for whatever reason, there's just not enough evidence of learning. And it's hard to read at the bottom there, but there's some examples at the bottom of that slide. So for example, let's say you have a student who moves into your school right towards the end of the term, or moves in from another country, and maybe you only have them in your class for 2 weeks. Well, you can't provide a mark or proficiency level in that case. You don't have enough evidence of learning to make that determination. And so this allows us to, in those unique situations, to put down an IE until we have enough evidence of learning to make a judgment of where the student fits in the particular scale. So that's, again, a little bit of shift in thinking of some of the ways that we used to do things. So that's kind of the draft reporting order. Where are we right now in Langley today? So this is for this year, this current school year that we're in. All of our elementary and middle schools are currently using the proficiency levels and have been since last year. So we made that shift last year at elementary middle. And again, we did that in anticipation of what we expected the reporting order to be. And obviously we were very glad that the reporting order lined up with that. So we're in line with that. So that is now in full into year 2. And I'm going to jump down to the bottom, secondary schools. So what we did this year is we continued that this year with our secondary schools. Since all of the students coming out of grade 7 at elementary or 8 at middle school were used to proficiencies, keeping in mind that we have a variety of different structures in our secondary schools. We have some 8 to 12 schools. We have some 9 to 12 schools. What we did this year is all students in their first year of high school are continuing with proficiencies. So students at Walnut Grove and Brookswood, which are 8 to 12 schools, the grade 8s are receiving proficiency levels on their report cards this year. And it's optional for the grade 9 teachers at those schools. And at our grade 9 to 12 schools like Mountain and LSS and Aldergrove, those schools, they're using it at grade 9. It's required. And so basically our 8s and 9s in their first year of secondary this year are all using proficiencies. And next year when it's K to 9, the entire system K to 9 will be on proficiency scales. So that's kind of where we're at this year. And we are continuing with letter grades and percentages, grades 10 to 12. And again, that will continue in alignment with the reporting order. So I think we've nicely aligned ourselves that the transition is smooth. We don't have students who are for 1 year getting letter grades again and going back to proficiencies. All the students who had proficiencies last year are getting them this year, and they'll continue to get them next year until they reach grade 10. The other thing that we're continuing with in our district is a pilot around student inclusive conferences at 4 of our elementary schools. That I'll save for a later day because that's a whole other presentation that we're going to be giving to you in a couple weeks, and it requires quite a bit of explanation, but really exciting about talking about meaningful conversations with parents, students, and teachers around reporting. Probably the most meaningful way we can do it, and like I said, we'll share more. Donna and I will share more of that at an upcoming meeting. So why are we doing all this? Where does all this fit? Well, it really fits in with research. And all the work that we've been doing in our district around assessment is based on research. And one of the questions we anticipate that you as trustees will get from parents is that, well, Grades, why are we taking away grades? Grades motivate my kids. So why are you taking them away? If you take away letter grades, they're not going to be motivated. And the reality is, yeah, you know, for some kids, I'm not going to disagree with that for sure. But the reality is there are lots of kids that are not motivated by grades. In actual fact, there's lots of kids that are demotivated by grades. And not all kids are motivated by grades, and grades should not be the thing that motivates kids. Learning is what we want to actually motivate kids. And what we all want is to create lifelong learners, just like all of us. And the best way to do that is, if you look at the research, is actually to focus in on the learning. And so that's really what we're trying to do, because if we're trying to create a system which is centered around equity and inclusivity, then we want to create a system where our kids are motivated to learn and improve, not because there's an extrinsic motivation at the end to get that. And I think the best way that I can illustrate that is actually a story about a young student who's actually in one of our schools. And he's not my kid. I have kids in the system. He is a student of one of our staff in the district. And he shared this story with me. And the story is about a young boy named Aiden. And he says they were coming home from soccer one night. And Aiden, who at the time was in grade 3, he was actually in a split class, grade 3-4. He asked his dad, he says, "Why do we give out letter grades to students?" And his dad asked him, he said, why are you asking me this random question? And he said, well, because some of the kids get Fs, and you can see that they feel stupid. And so I said to him, his dad said to him, he said, "Are you getting an F?" Which he shouldn't, because he was in grade 3. And of course, at the time, grade 3s didn't get letter grades anyways. And he says, no, it was the grade 4s. And he said he mentioned how some of the students would make fun of the other kids who would get an F. And so his dad asked him, he said, "Well, what would you like to see instead?" And his son, who's in grade 3, said, "All I want to know is, what am I doing well, and what do I need to do to improve?" His dad went on to say, Aiden's now in grade 6. He still loves to learn, still has never received a letter grade, and he talks at home about using the language of proficiency scales. And he's aware through the feedback that he gets from teachers that when he gets to developing, he knows what it means, he knows what proficient looks like, and he knows what he has to do in order to get there. And that's the conversations that we're having in our schools with our staff, and what we want to focus on around that learning piece. The other question that you're going to get from parents is, what about post-secondary? Well, my kids need grades for post-secondary. Yes, they do. But the reality is that in Canada, none of our post-secondary schools look at any grades other than grade 12. They don't. Sometimes for some very specific programs, they will look at grade 11 marks. But other than that, our post-secondaries do not look at grade 9 marks. They do not look at grade 8 marks. In fact, they don't even care about grade 10 marks. They only really care about grade 12 marks. And so having those proficiency scales at grade 8 and 9 are not going to affect post-secondary. And if our focus is about creating lifelong learners who really understand learning, they are going to be more prepared for post-secondary as lifelong learners than whether or not they've got a B or an A in their grade 8 or 9 report card. There are some in the United States, fair enough, you might get this question as well. Yes, most United States universities, if we do have kids that are applying, they are required to provide a grade 9 mark. But again, we have a system for doing that. Even if they don't get it on their report card in grade 9, we can deal with that. And again, the post-secondaries in the US, they require the grade 9 marks, but they're not actually looking at the grade 9 marks. They're still looking at their senior marks. It's just a requirement in terms of on their report card. And in actual fact, if parents are asking, what many of our universities are now doing is actually moving away from just looking at letter grades. They are asking kids to do portfolios, provide portfolios. They're doing interviews. There are some programs that actually do not even look at their grades, and it's solely based on an interview or a portfolio or something else. And that's becoming much more and more common in terms of our post-secondaries, where they're starting to recognize that it's not all about grades and marks, because they're discovering that many of the students who are walking in as straight A students actually aren't being successful in post-secondary. There are other factors that go into that besides just what their marks were. So lastly, just to close, where will we be in Langley in 2022 when the new reporting order kicks in? And that is, of course, hoping that they don't change anything on us from what they've published, which is always possible. But this is where we'll be next year. So yes, all of our elementary and middle schools will continue to be proficiencies K to 8. All of our secondary schools will have proficiency levels for grade 8 and 9 courses. And I want to stress that it's for grade 8 and 9 courses, not grade 8 and 9 students. So for example, you often will have a grade 9 student taking a grade 10 class. If the course is a grade 10 course, they will receive a letter grade in percentage. If it's a grade 9 or 8 course, it's a proficiency level. In addition to that, teachers may, and many of our teachers already are, using proficiency language and proficiency levels in their day-to-day classroom assessment with students in grades 10 to 12. So even though they're not putting it on the report card, they are still using the language and the theory and the research behind it. Just at the report card time, we still have to put the letter grades and the percentages on there. And we hope to continue to expand our student inclusive conferences at elementary. And as I mentioned, with the new reporting order, we will be moving towards core competence self-reflections across the system, K to 12, and also looking at goal setting. And as I said, that's our department where we have some work to do to figure out how we're going to make that happen in a timely and meaningful way for students. So hopefully that gives you a sense of where we're at, where we're headed, and what's happening. And I will take questions.
Thank you, sir. And so I could just get this on the table. I need a mover and a seconder for the draft reporting order. David Todd is the mover, seconded by Suzanne Perot. All right, I've got a speakers list here. And first off is Suzanne Perot. Trustee Perot, would you like to speak?
Thank you kindly. Thank you, George, for a really great presentation. I'm a big fan of no letter grades. My children are now graduated out of the Langley School District, and I brought them up from K to 9 without exposing them to letter grades and building into my communication through the IEP no letter grades to be shown so that they weren't experiencing those nuances of competition and how it would impact self as they're developing. So there's a really great place for that. And I love that you're looking at the question of what will we do to help students. It's the ongoing question we all have to be considering in all our work in education. So I love that thought process, and I really appreciated that you exposed, and it's an important conversation, that our universities look at grade 12. And the other stuff is the build up to it. So those are really important scaffolding steps I think we always need to take into consideration. Through the chair to the superintendent, and however you choose to address it, I got a couple of questions, and I'll just push them out and I'll let you move them how, so we can be succinct in our approaches. Regarding student goal setting, we saw the chart at the top, and I know with our students with disabilities, intellectual disabilities, so if we're interfacing with autism, ADHD, diagnosis of high anxiety, the bottom part of the chart is really beautifully laid out. The top part is, for a lot of our kiddos, becomes a challenge in how they look at themselves. As an autistic mind myself, bringing up autistic children and working heavily for 18 years in this community, I know that sense of self-assessment really affects our children and goes into the mental wellness and well-being, into that area of youth as we're going through puberty and discovering self, and that's a natural portion of development. So we're looking at, when I look at these charts, is will that self-assessment of the students affect their reporting? Because often they'll over-assess or under-assess. That balance is not easily found. And I'm interested in understanding what the inclusive reporting, George talked about that the inclusive reporting is aligned. What does that look like? And again, how does that goal setting for that individual, that student, impact that reporting? And then the insufficient evidence, i.e., are we looking at supplemental goals and replacement goals here? And is there a risk with the i.e. moving the child off the dogwood unintentionally, unknowingly, If in the event we miss them by chance, because sometimes it happens, and move them towards the evergreen pathway, and that we end up in a situation where, right, we don't have a child that could be graduating but isn't graduating. So those are some really important pieces that I'm looking at, as how we look at our children with disabilities as it interfaces with this, and using those supplemental goals and replacement goals, and how that reporting is affected.
I can answer that, Gord, if you want.
Sure, yeah, and George, so thank you. And just a few comments in terms of the student goal setting piece. Again, this is one piece, and you're right. Some kids can be self-deprecating and have very negative views of themselves, and they may reflect that in terms of that process. But that's where you have a teacher piece. There's a number of ways that the information can triangulate so that you're not going to be impacted by that one piece alone. And probably with a teacher trying to find ways to notice that and find ways to build that in terms of the self-esteem. The inclusive reporting alignment in terms of self-assessment piece, that's certainly something, George, I'd love to take on, but I wanted to comment on the evergreen dogwood pathway, because that's a very important one. And we have had in the past throughout this province, and in Langley too, where we've had kids end up on an evergreen that should have been on a dogwood. And our Aboriginal community was probably most impacted by that, and kids on behavior, with behavior designations, sadly. The province is really cranking up the scrutiny around that. We are also. In fact, the process of moving a child there's a series of steps that you'll have to go through to really ensure that that is indeed the only place we can ultimately land. Because I do think in the past it was a little easier to kind of move there than it should have been. Just some of my own thoughts in the process, but certainly, George, I'd defer to you in terms of any of those.
Yeah, and if you, to speak to the inclusive education policy around the assessment, there's a whole section in the ministry's supporting documentation which outlines it, and it's very clear. So all students with learning disabilities or diverse abilities, they are expected to be assessed to the same learning standards that all regular students are. So when I use the word learning standards, that refers to the curricular competencies and the content of a course. And so what's very clear in the policy is that we are not separating them and viewing them differently. If they are able to work towards those learning standards, even with some adaptations, then they will be assessed as a regular student and will have the opportunity to pursue a dogwood. Some of them might have some supplemental goals, which we would call, what we call in schools, interventions, to help them meet those standards. But that's where the difference is from the old reporting order, where we tended to separate those two. Basically, they're saying all students need to be given the opportunity to meet those standards with some supports or interventions to do that. And then there would be the odd few students who are unable to meet those learning standards, and those students may have their own set of separate learning standards that they're working towards, but that's going to be a very small group. So it becomes more important is what are we doing in the school to support and intervene to allow those students to meet those learning standards and to be assessed. And insufficient evidence is not to be used in those categories. Those are used for very different situations, such as a student who gets very sick and has to miss a large chunk of school. And the key word I used is evidence. If we have evidence of learning, even if that student is struggling, they would be on that scale, they would be emerging. It's only when we don't have evidence, and when we don't have evidence is when a kid is sick or a kid is away or a kid comes into your system late, that's when IE is being used. And it, again, is very clearly spelled out in the documentation that's available to look at for anybody. So hopefully that helps.
Certainly, but if we could just have singular questions so everyone gets a chance, then we can come back and do second and thirds for anyone that requires that. Go ahead with your response.
Chair. Through the chair to George. So when we're talking about some adaptations, are we in alignment with the IEP, or is that separate from the IEP? Because I want to understand that IEP supporting document, that guiding tool for the implementation of the learning plan, is remaining intact and honored as we look at adaptations as it interfaces with those IEs to ensure that student is moving forward. I caught on the word of some adaptations, so that's where I'm hanging on going, are we looking at the IEP as it's interfacing with this, or is this a separate conversation? How are we working those pieces together to ensure the implementation is occurring?
No, it's aligned with the IEP, and it's also aligned with the resource teacher or learning support teacher working with the classroom teacher to provide the necessary adaptations that are required for that student to be successful.
Thank you. Trustee Marnie Wilson, would you like to ask your question now, please?
I knew I'd get it eventually, you know. Thank you. What a great presentation. And yeah, that's exciting things. You've already answered several of the questions that sort of popped up for me as far as, yeah, the dogwood and the evergreen was a big thing because often that can kind of get lost in the shuffle. And also the IE, I was a little concerned there, thinking that some students with diverse abilities may get put in that category. So I'm happy to hear that that is very specific and will not be used in that regard. So yeah, I also just, I love when you said that people come up and say that some kids are motivated by grades, and for those parents that are really worried about that, they will find a way to rank those emerging or extending will be the talk of an A, and they'll all come up with that little system. So you don't have to worry, they'll still manage in there, even though I do love this new system. And I guess my question then, all the other ones were really answered. I'm so glad that they didn't really interfere with grade 12 because I knew that was going to be an uphill battle with parents and the letter grade going to yeah, post-secondary. So thank you for leaving that alone. I guess my question is, it seems like I think we all understand the value of this type of assessment, and you know, there's no doubting that it is enriching for students, but it seems like for teachers it can be a little more of a workload, I guess, than the typical standard letter grade or percentage and just the comments that you kind of pick out, because when you're individualizing, which is great for students, and you're making every student know how to go from developing to proficient, I'm just wondering, has there been anything sort of put in or implemented so that, you know, maybe report card prep is given more time or anything like that for teaching staff who are writing the reports? Maybe through the chair or to, I don't know who.
So yeah, it's a good question, Trustee Wilson. And no, at this point, there has not been anything in terms of discussion along that. I think where they're trying to go with this actually, and I was guilty of it too as a teacher, is I was doing way more work than the kids and around that learning piece for them. And I think what I like about the focus on skills and competencies and not having to blow through the content the way they have, there's time built in to the classroom day for kids. If you don't have the kids part of this process and you're wearing it all, yeah, you're going to have your workload here. You have to find a way to draw them into being part of that process in terms of self-assessment piece, working with the parents. So if you can kind of, and you have time within the day to do that, because you don't have to kind of get through the textbook and hit every line. I think they're going to be able, if you manage that way well, you'll position yourself well to do it. I think where we have to spend time as a district is on the professional development piece, making sure we give folks the skills and the ability to be able to manage this in a way that can be effective. But anything else, George, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I would agree with that. In fact, I know quite a few teachers who actually at the end of the term actually sit down with their
Students and co-create their comments together. And I think that's the piece where moving towards, you know, I think I go back to my own experience and probably many of our experience. Some of us, sometimes I think we felt like assessment was done to us, right? We were being assessed and we were told this is what our mark. And I think the shift that we're seeing in our system and that we're working with the professional development with our teachers is assessment needs to be done together. It needs to include the student in the conversation, and it shouldn't be a surprise when they get the report card. So I actually know lots of teachers who sit down and they actually have conversations with the student about how the student thinks they're doing and how the teacher thinks they're doing, and then together they arrive at that and they create that comment. And so the student gets a report card. It's not a surprise because they actually know, and they also feel like they're part of the assessment process. And so when you do that, it actually creates less work for the teacher because you're actually involving the student. It's not you just sitting and doing it completely by yourself. So so they're now, having said, are all our teachers there? No, we have lots of work to do. Yes. And we're doing a lot of that work in our schools to try and help teachers with the shift. But those are some of the things that are actually making assessment easier. The other thing we're working with our teachers is trying to get them to understand they don't need to put a mark on anything. Again, if I go back to when I was a classroom teacher, and now that I know what I know, I wish I could go back and do it over again. I felt I had to mark everything. And in actual fact, no, there's many different ways to collect evidence. And it can be conversations, it can be observations I have in class, it can be something I hear in a group conversation. And so I can use all that evidence to make a judgment of where I think a student is at when it comes to their learning. And in actual fact, what's more important to the student is I don't have to mark it, but can I give the student that feedback that Aiden referred to? What am I doing well? What do I need to improve on? And so again, working with teachers to get them to understand you don't have to take every single piece of paper home and mark it and put a number on it, and there's other ways to achieve the same thing. So those are some of the ways we're trying to help teachers actually reduce their workload.
Thank you, sir. And now I've got Trustee David talk, please.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah. Exemplary work, honestly. I really like the fact that we're in an excellent place in terms of alignment. I think that was good planning on our part. I like the fact that it lines up that way. One of the slides talked about hope, efficacy, and belief in themselves. And what wonderful language for what we would wish every student to have at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end. That hope, efficacy. I look forward to the day when you have exemplars embedded somewhere that talk about goal setting in kindergarten, because what could be more fantastic than a group of kindergarten kids talking about setting goals and just in their conversations and their interactions and talk about setting goals. And I if you want social media, that's where you're gonna, there's nothing more, yeah, anyway, special than that. Basically what we're talking about is metacognition. And when it comes to that goal setting, they're actually thinking about their thinking, and they're doing a wonderful job. And I've seen it done already. It's happening. It's happening. So when we talk about the conversation around teachers and the report cards, I think for a long time, coming from an elementary background, elementary teachers have been doing a lot of this for a long time, up to K-7 level, and now it's being pushed up a little higher. But it's yes, it's probably more work, but I think it's almost more satisfying work to it. To paraphrase, you're talking about making great learners, not necessarily great letters. And when we go back to numbers, and I had a conversation with my daughter, she's in grade 11, so she's worked her way through the system, and even now she gets letter grades, full disclosure, but she likes to use the terms proficient. Dad, I'm only proficient, I want to move into extending. She just likes that transition. So it's happening already, and as was said earlier, we can go, kids are going to do the letter grades no matter what at that level, but we can go, you're just subtly changing the language around learning. And that's the best place to be. So thank you. The one question, what's the greatest hurdle? I think I know what I would think, the conversations with parents, and how is that going?
Yeah, I would say that's probably one of the biggest hurdles. For the most part.
Can you use your microphone, please?
Sorry. Yeah. For the most part, the conversation with parents is going well. As Gord mentioned, Donna and I have done 2 parent nights. We did one last year for elementary, middle. We did another one for secondary. We've got lots of good questions from them. And most parents, once you can sit down with them and explain to them and kind of have this conversation about what we're trying to do, the majority of them start to understand, and a lot of those conversations are happening at the school level as well with our administrators in schools as we're making the shift. And a lot of them are happening with classroom teachers as they sit down for parent-teacher conferences and other types of meetings around their kids. So yeah, it's taking a little bit of time, but I think most parents are sort of slowly coming on board once they understand what the language means. And I think that's a big part of it in terms of once they understand what the language means. But when, as you kind of mentioned, when their kids can come home and explain it to them with the language, then that actually really helps us. Because when the kids start talking about it, then they're like, oh, okay, well, if my child gets it, then it's obviously it's going to be okay. So, yeah. Having said that, there's still some that are not completely 100% behind it, but I don't think we're ever going to get 100% fully supportive. But most parents are pretty good with the shift that we're doing. So, yeah, pretty supportive.
And the last person on my speakers list is Tony Ward.
There we go. Okay. Thank you very much. I'm trying to wrap my mind around this, and I've been kind of a slow convert to this way of thinking with all the staff presentations and conversation with Gord, and thinking in terms of probably what you're getting from other parents is striving, well, me, maybe not striving for A's, but striving for something that's objective. It's a clear standard. If I hit this, then I get this mark. So. But my mind is wrapping around this, and I'm very excited, and I like Trustee Todd's learning, not letters. Question for you is, in between, let's say, emerging and developing, or developing proficient, how does a teacher, and like you said, you're moving educators beyond this idea of marking, grading, but how does an educator get a fair assessment to know whether one is between here and there without going totally into subjective criteria? So how do they make that? Because it really, obviously it matters to a kid. For me, I really want to know whether I'm extending or just proficient or less than that. Like that would really matter. So I'm just wondering, how do educators delineate between those two when it's right on the verge?
Yeah, it's a good question. So part of that is actually the work that our teachers are doing right now in our schools, and that is actually sitting down and actually looking at student work together and having conversations about what does emerging actually look like, what does developing actually look like, what does proficient actually look like. So that's a large part of the work, is actually teachers working together, coming up with that as a group and deciding that. And one of the reasons that's really important too, sort of to build on your point, is that you also want proficient to look the same in my classroom as it looks in your classroom, because otherwise we have a problem there. And so that's actually what our teachers are doing. They're doing a couple things. First of all, they're sitting down and talking about what are actually the priorities that it's like absolutely vital that all kids in our system need to be able to do and understand. And then what does it actually look like to be proficient in that? And that's actually where we start. We start with proficient because that's where we want our kids to be. And then we work back and say, okay, well, if this is proficient, then this is what developing looks like. And this is what emerging looks like. And part of those conversations are then, okay, if they're here, the focus is less on what does emerging look like, but more what do we need to do in order to get that student to get there. And the other piece I'd leave you to think about too is when you look at those categories, I think it's also very important to understand that they're not equal in their size. I would argue that emerging and developing are much larger, and proficient is a bit more of a narrow in terms of size, in terms of saying, because proficient is where we want them to be. A great, one of the people that we've been working with in our district who's a guru of assessment is Katie White, and what she likes to describe proficient is the door. Proficient is the door that we want every kid to walk through, and emerging is kind of the stairs, and developing is the hallway leading to that door. So basically the emerging kids are on the stairs, we need to get them into the hallway to get them through the door. The developing kids are at the door, at the hallway, we got to get them through the door. But the stairs in the hallway are much longer, and it takes a lot more work to get to proficient, and our goal is to get them to the door. And so that's why defining what the door is, if we can get every kid through the door, then I think we've done a masterful job of the work that we're doing in our school. So does that help? Okay. Okay. Right. So.
Thank you. And now the last question actually is to Trustee Fox, please.
Thank you. And thank you for the work you're doing. Just moving to implementation, two things. Number one, right now you've got 4 pilot schools, as I understand it, that you're working with. For student inclusive conferences, which is an important piece to the communication, which is what I'm going to focus on here. You want to, by the end of next year, move to all? No? Okay. Explain that transition then, please.
So student inclusive conferences is just one piece of this. It is a very very different approach to communicating student learning. And it's a bit labor intensive. So what we're doing there is we actually started with one school 2 years ago, RC Garnett. Last year we added Dorothy Peacock. And what we've been doing, and this year we're adding 2 more schools, Short Reed and Lynn Fripps. And the reason we're doing it that way is because what we're actually doing is with RC Garnett, because this was new to us, we relied on other districts who were doing student inclusive conferences to help our teachers understand how it worked. So we brought in outside people to help the staff there move forward with that. What we've now been able to do is last year, we were able to use the RC Garnett staff to help with the learning with the Dorothy Peacock staff. That brought us to 2 schools. And this year we're using those 2 staffs to work with the new schools as we're bringing them on board. So we're slowly building up to that, but using, taking small steps because there's a lot of learning that goes into those types of conferences. And so using the schools that have it up and running to support those schools. So extrapolate that. The goal would be that next year we'll have 4 schools who are doing it. Perhaps if we have, the manpower, we would be able to then move it up to 8 schools and kind of grow from there, because we really feel having a sister school that's gone through it, have those teachers support the new teachers in terms of the process of what a student inclusive conference actually is all about, is really important to make it meaningful and to make sure it's being done right. And again, I know we're doing a presentation for you on student inclusive conferences in a couple weeks to the education meeting, and we're going to have a couple of our principals who've been doing it to come and talk to you about it. And I think it would be helpful for you to hear that presentation so that you fully know what student inclusive conferences were, and then you'll understand why the shift is happening very slowly. But big dream, in a couple of years, few years, we would hope that all of our elementary schools and potentially our middle schools would be doing student inclusive conferences. And I'll just say they're very different than student-led conferences. They are not the same thing. The key word is student inclusive conferences. And we'll share more about that with you. Probably difficult to happen at secondary just because of the number of students that a secondary teacher has. And again, we can explain more when we do that presentation. So does that help? Okay.
Thank you.
And I'll save my question for last, and I really appreciate the growth mindset. I'm really concerned, though, that we stopped at grade 9 and then 10, 11, 12. We don't use the growth mindset. We're not looking at that, right? And so that paradigm, it really concerns me. So if you could help me out in helping me understand how assessment in grade 10, 11, and 12 is going to lead to a growth mindset. Or is there any hope for us? Do we have to wait till the government comes out with another plan for us, or do we have something there? Because I don't see a lot of changes. See, we're asking K to 9 to do all the changes, but 10, 11, and 12, no change at all. It's business as usual.
Yeah, it's a good question. And if Dawn and I had our dream, we would have preferred that they went 10 to 12, but they didn't. But as I said earlier, I can tell you, working with our secondary schools, that many of our grade 10 to 12 teachers are actually using the proficiency language and the growth mindset assessment approach, because it's more than just the proficiency language. It's much more than that. It's just about the focus on learning and feedback and growth. So I can tell you there are lots and lots of our grade 10 to 12 teachers who are assessing students throughout the year without putting marks on it. They're using the proficiency language, but when it comes to the end of the term, they are using that information and some of the supports that our department has put together. So for example, my department has put together a conversion chart that teachers can use to help them determine a percentage. So a lot of it's still happening in the day-to-day classroom. A lot of focus on metacognition that was mentioned earlier. It's just at the end they have to put that on the report card because that's a requirement. So I'm can confidently say it's happening in our grade 10 to 12 classrooms. It's just the way we report at the end of the year is different because that's the requirement. So.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Any other questions? Last questions? All right. I need to have, we've got a mover and a seconder. So all those in favor of the draft reporting? Okay. And it's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. I'd just like to make an announcement that Trustee Coburn has let me know that she had to leave the meeting and she's no longer online. Thank you. On to 7.2 communications plan, 2019 to 2022 update. All right. Go ahead, Superintendent.
Thank you, Chair Ross. And just as our communications manager, Joe Abshire, gets us set up here, just a few comments. So the communications plan, this is something that's done yearly with the board, and also it is presented at communications committee. And I just want to comment on a few things that in terms of my time working with Joe, and what I appreciate. And one of them is the storytelling. I mean, it just does a great way of sharing out to our community the myriad of different things that people are doing day in and day out with our kids. And we have work to do there. And our social media presence has gone up dramatically. A master video, and I give Tony lots of credit. She works with between the two of them. Just find a way to capture, sharing out those little 1 minute and 2 minute pieces there. Parents love it, kids love it, and we have lots to showcase. And I think our professionals like to see their stuff out there, which is really appreciated. And that full credit to her on that. The other part is doing the work during COVID. Talk about challenges in terms of trying to keep that day-to-day communication up. She's had me on video, she's had me doing different newsletters out, and that constant piece of trying to keep people informed, trying to keep the calm. And also in terms of the messaging you've had to do, I've had to do around some really challenging questions and conversations. So most appreciative of it, love having her as part of the team, and she's going to do a great job tonight kind of walking you through the plan. So over to you, Jill.
Thank you for the kind words, and thank you for thanking me. I guess I'll start off by just also taking this opportunity publicly to thank everyone in the system, our students, our staff, our teachers, our administrators, the board, parents especially. This was obviously a very difficult year, and so thank you so much for all of your support and ongoing feedback. So as you know, this is my opportunity to talk about and give you an update on the communications plan for the last year, which was year 3, and I'm talking about the school year. So in June 2019, just to remind you, I developed in conjunction and consultation with the leadership team the communications plan, which spans over a 3-year period. It's aligned with the strategic plan. So of course, all of the things that we do operationally, the things that we do communications wise, they kind of complement each other. So what I'm holding here, and it was in your board package, is the update, which I won't go through the whole thing because of the sake of time, but I'll just cover some of the highlights and sort of the milestone things that are important for communications when we look at the past year. This was an interesting exercise to do when I was sort of researching and coming up with the document, because I had to take a step back, because when you think about the last 20 months of COVID, that included year 2, it included year 3, and I think for all of us who are living this, it was all kind of a blur. So thankfully for documenting everything, especially through videos, I was able to say, okay, this is what year 3 was like. And I think you know the positive and all of the negative things that we've all lived through. So I'll just move on to my next slide, which will cover some of the highlights. Talking about COVID-19 communications, obviously a huge priority for us in year 3. I'm going to highlight the communication survey that we sent out to parents in June. I'll focus on how we are celebrating our story. That's one of the big 5 key pillars in our main communications plan. And then, projecting what our outlook for the next year following after the school year. So starting off with communications, obviously year 3 was all about COVID-19 school exposures. I think if you recall this time last year, it was kind of a negative tone. It was a very uncertain time. We were just starting to get COVID notifications in our schools, and obviously we've gone through the whole year having lived it, and we're still here today. But I stand here to say that definitely our communications tone and feeling is probably a lot more positive for various factors, which I'll talk about, and obviously the public health landscape and having people vaccinated helps. So the amount of communications in year 3 has been tremendous, just like in year 2. When it comes to communicating to the families, we've probably had 2/3 the amount of communications compared to year 2. And then when we talk about the communications to staff, quantity-wise, it's been approximately the same amount. So not too much has changed as far as messaging and content. I think the thing that's changing is really basically changes in mandates and things like that. But as far as engaging with families, you know, just a minor decline over the year. A big tool that was useful in COVID notifications and in just general communications was the introduction of School Messenger in January. I think you remember the explanation that it's a one-way notification system, and we can push out, you know, text messages, phone recordings, that sort of thing. And it's been really instrumental, especially when we're dealing with COVID-19 and self-isolation communications and things like that, because it's a way that you can see if families have read it or not, right? So there's a lot of cool features with that tool that we're still to this day trying to explore all of the full opportunities with that tool. The other big, you know, key moments of last year included the mask wearing changes that we saw in March. And of course, that was a very contentious topic, not just for our district, but just, you know, in the public. So that was very challenging for all of our staff to not only get the message out, but also try to work at ways of, you know, responding to questions that people had, or, you know, just even helping families cope with these changes, because obviously that was a very big transition. You know, it wasn't all bad news last year. It wasn't all negative. Definitely there was a bright spot, you know, when we were able as a district to communicate staff vaccinations or the eligibility of vaccinations. That was a really exciting point for the district. Again, one of those key moments to talk about all the work that had to go behind the work with discussing with, you know, the different partner groups that we work with and the parent community as well. The challenges for year 3 were very similar to year 2. Of course, again, the adaptability and flexibility in dealing with the changes and communicating that. Privacy was, of course, still an issue, still is now. You know, we've been very transparent in our communication in year 3. That has changed since, as far as publicly sharing school-wide notifications, because that direction had changed from the ministry and the province. Something to highlight when it comes to transparency, we were probably one of the first districts that actually decided to post everything on social media and on our school district websites in relation to the school-wide notifications. Other districts caught on too, and that was a decision that DLT, Gord, myself, we all made from the get-go, because we knew that Langley's a very close-knit community, and we know that it's a very social media active community, and that you know, word travels fast. And so this is something, as long as we were allowed to do that, that's something that we decided we would do. Obviously, that was year 3. This new year is a little bit different. Challenges again, anxiety, and just trying to cope and help our families, you know, manage their mental health from a, you know, health and safety perspective. So just moving from COVID-19 communications, I'm sure you may have questions about it at the end, but just shifting gears over to, okay, how did we communicate to families, and what are we hearing from them? So we sent out a communication survey at the end of the school year in June, and the whole point of this was, it was always one of our goals prior to COVID that, hey, we want to do an audit and actually hear from our families. Since we sent so much communications last year, you know, we thought, okay, what better way to survey families now? The timing wasn't ideal, because I think if you do recall, the end of the school year, we had gone through so much from a parent perspective, from, you know, from a district perspective. And if you recall, that end of year was very, very strange. We had the heat dome and we canceled school. So, you know, I knew the uptake of getting responses wasn't going to be great, but I thought, okay, if we can get a snapshot from our families, at least it's something for us to work with, and we can, you know, expand and enhance that moving forward in the years to come. So we had 839 responses. We had about 12 different questions. Some were open-ended to actually just have open-ended. Please give us your feedback on communications. How can we do better? And the information was really, I think, eye-opening, actually. In general, families are satisfied, and which was reassuring for me, because it means, okay, us as a district, we're doing things right. Like you can see there, 40% were said things were very good, 50% were good. And then when there were questions about quality and quantity, families were okay with just the status quo. One of the questions was frequency. Do you want things monthly, quarterly, as and when needed? The majority said as and when needed, which is what we were doing anyway. So that tells me, okay, maybe that's a manageable amount of frequency that we can continue on with. Another important thing for emergencies, text message is important, which makes sense because it's the fastest way to, you know, get a hold of people. And definitely there were, you know, people have identified barriers. And so we're working with that. Of course, staff capacity is an issue in relation to trying to get things translated in time. But, you know, it's something that we're trying to work on, and at least prioritizing, okay, here are the different documents and like communications assets that for sure have to be translated, and let's try to plan accordingly to get it, you know, to make it happen. And I think at the end of the day, based on feedback, there were lots of suggestions, you know, a long list. And at the end of the day, we know that there is always room for improvement. So I was really happy that we took the time to do this survey and get the responses so that we can plan ahead moving forward. So now moving on to just my favorite pillar of the communications plan, as Gord mentioned, celebrating our story, which is probably the best part of my job. If I could only do this, that would probably be amazing. But obviously that's not the case, because we're a big district, a growing district, and the day-to-day is pretty busy. We have lots of different emergencies that pop up, crisis communications that need to be dealt with, but we still have district priorities that have to get done. So I'm just highlighting a few priorities, and of course, health and safety is always a priority, but these were some of the themes that from an operation standpoint and from a communication standpoint that were important to highlight. As you know, the Framework for Enhancing Student Learning, which is a website that documents data and all these amazing stories that tell the story of our student learning in the district, that's been completed. We presented to the board, and of course we shared it with the public as well. And we will continue to share it because it's actually a working document that we have a process in place where myself and Anthony Biondi, who's on our communications team, we're going to be working with the Instructional Services Department to make it a point that every 4 months we're going to be updating content. So look forward to that. The other two things that I'm featuring here, the district statements on anti-racism and truth and reconciliation, were really, really, really important documents, not just for our district, but I just think, for society in general. In relation to our district, why this is important in communications especially is it really tells the public and our audiences, internally and externally, this is who we are, this is what we're about, this is the tone and language we're going to be using moving forward, and not just in documents related to anti-racism and truth and reconciliation, but just in general. Like, I hope moving forward that my job will be to make sure I'm looking at things in an anti-racist lens, or with the lens of truth and reconciliation. Of course, I'm not perfect, but that is the hope that can also trickle throughout other people in our district when you make statements like that. So I can go on and on about all their different priorities, but I'll just move over to now all of the positive news stories in our district, which there are honestly so many that I could probably be here all day, and you probably have all seen them over the last year. But some of the three things that stand out that hit media locally and even regionally, of course, the Rainbow Crosswalk fundraising project, how successful that was from a media lens too. I mean, there was local media, there was even Vancouver media who wanted to cover the event. And it not only just showed, okay, this is who we are, this is what we do, but it really showed a great example of one of the other pillars in our communications plan, which is just the strengthening relationships, especially with stakeholders. I mean, the photo speaks for itself. You had multiple people from all different, walks of life there celebrating this awesome rainbow crosswalk that, is literally meters away from us. Yeah, so it's a story that just overall with these 3 stories that I'm going to talk about, they all have the same theme of longevity. It wasn't just a one-off, okay, here's a crosswalk. This is something that stands the test of time for our whole district. So moving on to the next point, the Aldergrove positive changes that we've seen, that took a lot of care and consideration in a communications plan solely on that whole rollout, just because if you recall, like this stemmed from the middle school consultation. So, there were sensitivities in relation to that. But in addition to that, I mean, we're dealing with COVID. So if we're talking about changing even minor things in the system, you have to be delicate and sensitive about it. And I think it was done in a respectful way. And, kudos to all the staff and administrators at Aldergrove, both Betty Gilbert and ACSS for working with the district on, getting to a good place, rolling it out and having people feel good about it. I remember getting emails from the public, like different members of the community who have businesses, and they were all excited about the FitCore gym that you see in the photo, and they were so excited to just bring their families there. And it's not just the FitCore gym; it was the learning around it and all that. But I mean, that's just a visual representation of what that whole project stood for. And moving on to, of course, we can never forget the naming of Donna Gabriel Robbins Elementary School, which I think everyone who thinks about that whole year and when she was online talking about what that naming meant to her, we all got emotional. I still think about it and want to cry because it really was a celebration, not just for the opening of the school and for our district, but yeah, it was definitely a celebration of her and her family. And I think we all feel warm and fuzzy when we think about those times. So there definitely was, yes, it was a challenging year and COVID definitely dominated the headlines, but at the same time, there was so much good work happening in the district that we are able to celebrate. And I mean, I think social media is one thing, it speaks for itself. You talked about it, how our media presence is there, and it's very true. We're 100 shy away from 10,000 followers on Facebook, which is pretty amazing because, this is organizations and companies, they want to get to that point where it's a targeted audience that you're speaking to every day, right? Of course, not everyone's on social media, so I take pride in it, but at the same time, there's other avenues to communicate, so I don't want to get too much into social media, although, I do love it because I kind of was born in it and like lived through it all. But definitely the evidence shows, because I'm kind of a data nerd too, as I'm collecting all these things, that we're a growing district and also our presence just in the community is growing as well. And that's clear online and offline. So what's next? I think I'm very positive, actually, although as we know, I don't have a crystal ball. I can't tell you what's going to happen in 6 months, but I think there's some certainty in some of the bullet points that I have here on what we can expect. I think we're going to continue with COVID-19 communications. I do hope that we're going to be shifting to more a recovery from COVID and more focusing time and staff capacity on our regular objectives that were in the year 1 plan. There's a lot of different projects that, quite frankly, we just had to put on the back burner because our priority was just full on health and safety and COVID and making sure everyone was feeling good about, being at work and being at school. Of course, celebrating our story, but with more of a different lens based on all the things I talked about, like anti-racism, truth and reconciliation, having just survived COVID for 20 months, moving forward with that and what does that mean for communications? And the last point, building capacity. I love learning, but I also love teaching, and it would be so great if in an ideal world, there was the time there to actually spend time with administrators administrators or spend time with the board, do media training, you know, obviously help develop key messages or FAQs that have to go be used by staff. And that's very challenging when you're dealing with a crisis like COVID. So the hope is that moving forward, we can do more of that in the next year. So at that point, I'll just open up for questions and also encourage the trustees to take the time to read the update, which is in the board package, and also follow us on social media. I know that there is also bad parts about social media. There's good and bad, but if you want to have uplifting stories, you'll definitely find that on our district channels.
Thank you, Joe. I've got a few questions from the trustees. And first off, I have, I've got Suzanne Perot, then I've got David Todd, and Charlie Fox. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Simply a statement. Joe, I want to extend my deep appreciation to you and your work for what you have done with our district and for our district and how you're leading us in communication. You have done and are doing a phenomenal job on creating that opportunity for celebration of relationship and strengthening relationships through those communication tools you're utilizing. And when we're walking through such a difficult time like this pandemic, your ability to reach out and highlight our student successes, especially when we're seeing stuff showing up, it's exciting. I get to flip it back onto my own trustee page, and the communication pieces that come forward as a result in the background, as well as on the threads that show up, you can see the parent engagement and how much they appreciate that communication going forward and having that ability to have that relationship with us as a district. And so I really just want to express my appreciation to you for your work, your steadfastness. It's a big job, and I thank you for it.
And if I could just interrupt, I should have got a mover before I opened it up for discussion. So moved by Charlie Fox, seconded by David Todd. Thank you. And now I've got on my list, I've got David Todd. Go ahead.
So that was just wonderful. And I can honestly say one of the best moves that we've done was hiring you. I really, when we talk about celebrating stories, let's celebrate you. And celebrate you and Anthony. I'd like to say I can take a lot of credit for Anthony because I taught him gym for 2 years, but not so much. No, I like the fact that you get ahead of things and you get ahead of the story, and that's critical. And when you talk about celebrating the stories and you drill it down and you make news, not necessarily compact, but quaint and cute, and you really are doing a great service to our district when you do that. So thank you on so many levels, I did have one question, and I did pre-warn. Recently, there was a survey done by the BCTF, and it was all about membership, health, and safety. So I did see one of your slides that talked about that, and there was a question around ventilation in schools. And I know that we've been reassured that we're at top shelf level. We've done all those things, and then they drilled down the data, and they went right to the Fraser Health, and they said 64% of teachers felt they were not informed. And I'm a teacher, and I know that sometimes things get, had not received adequate information about quality of ventilation or the status of any in-progress ventilation upgrades or updates. And I'm just wondering, when you talk about school messenger or something like that, like blurbs go out, our superintendent said, yes, we've talked about the ventilation upgrades. And I know sometimes it gets into technicalese, right, and once they start talking VEER 6 or VEER 7, people, or SEER or whatever, it just goes way over their head. But just some way of digesting that and getting it out to the LTA or QP, our partner groups. And because again, that we don't necessarily want to go to fear, but you combat fear with information. So that's one of the areas where I went, maybe we haven't done enough, and it's Fraser Health, so I'm not sure if it's just Langley, but it's certainly our area. So one area. And I do have one question. When we talked about anti-racism and we followed up with truth and reconciliation, was there any pushback? Like, did we get pushback saying we're woke, or, you know, there's some kind of, what is going on here? Was there a bit of pushback at that time?
For both, yes. Not a lot. Not enough for it to be a concern, to be honest. You know, maybe Superintendent Stewart could add, but from all the channels that I monitor, it's I think anything that's any issue that's contentious, even with COVID, like you can't make everyone happy. So yes, like to say we didn't get any emails of people that were angry would be not accurate, but not to the point that for me, from a communications manager standpoint, was concerning. It could be different, but we work closely, so I'm pretty sure, you know, Gord may say the same thing. But yeah, no, that's a very good question, and I think you need to understand the work that goes into any statements. It's not like something we wrote overnight, right? Like this is work that takes days of thinking and strategizing and working with, you know, our Aboriginal program principal, Mike Pugh, Mike Moore, you know, different players in our district that really, I think it's important to know I never feel alone when I have to do something big in consultation for GLT. It's always with the support of experts. I'm not an educator. I'm just the messenger. So when it comes to things like that, I'm always fully supported and have full confidence in the work with staff and, you know, people like Gordon, Mal, and Woody. So I don't know if Gord, you have anything to add. I can also speak to ventilation, but maybe we'll just cover that last question first.
Yeah, in terms of on all fronts, what I've noticed living in Langley for 30 plus years, and the changes that I've seen, just a much greater shift to inclusion than I would have seen 30 years ago. And I say that because whether it's anti-racism, LGBTQ plus, and certainly truth and reconciliation, 30 years ago, I'm going to tell you that the media we would have probably had quite a few challenges there. And I get a lot of fan mail, and this is I'm very pleased to say that in all three of these cases, what Joe said, it is very, very minimal. And I think that's fantastic. I think that's a real credit to the community's come a long way, a lot through education and a lot through persevering and a lot through our kids, really kind of pushing us to be better. And so that is, I think in itself is a real good news story. I will say just in terms of, and turn it back to Joe on the ventilation piece, but Fraser Health, just so you're aware, goes from, I believe, Mel, even on this one, it goes, is it Chilliwack to Coquitlam? Like like Coquitlam's even in that it's quite a huge region. And I put that on out because to your point, when you look at that survey, it could apply to a lot of different areas. What we've done, Barry spends significant time as Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources with the LTA at 10, is very well aware in terms of conversations around ventilation. In terms of Joe has made sure website communications on out, but it is technical stuff. And I honestly have had very little of anything in terms of questions on this, which is good. I'm hoping people say, hey, it sounds like Langley's in a good place, because they didn't feel that. I tend to hear about it. So, but I just want to be with that data. You're talking a massive area, and I can't speak to other districts in terms of where they're at on that spectrum. But
yeah, I can completely concur with what Mr. Stewart was saying. Like, obviously the media regionally, like in Vancouver, like took ventilation, the provincial media took it, you know, as far as it can go, which was interesting because locally we weren't seeing that. We weren't seeing mass emails or, you know, people protesting about ventilation or anything like that. I mean, I will say, you know, we did get a few emails here and there, but the good thing is we were pretty proactive with our communication. We had, you know, we created an infographic to explain, here's some of the basic lingo, which like, yeah, I didn't understand, which is really, if I don't understand what facilities is telling me, then you have an issue that you have to, you know, come up with something to make it easy for all parents to understand. So, you know, we went through that. We worked with we have actually all of our ventilation reports for each school site listed on our website as per the ministry requirements. And that we point to parents when, for those that are really, really concerned, they take it to the next level. They want to know all the, nitty gritty details. There it is. Like we just actually received an email about it today. So all the information's there. And we're very responsive when parents ask for all those, all of that information. So yeah, that's pretty much, ventilation hasn't really been a major concern here.
Thank you very much. And one further question, Charlie Fox, I think you had a question, Trustee Fox. Go.
Well, first of all, I had a comment just in light of Mr. Kozlovic's presentation. I just thought we would put your the work you've done on the provincial proficiency scale, and I've just acknowledged that you're extending. That was only my evaluation, but they're up for that. Just a question though, you did a communication survey. Was this the initial one, or was there any documentations to show what's happened over time, or are you going to do another one in a year or 2 years? What's the case there? Just in terms of, we want to ensure the extending is going on.
Yeah, absolutely. Not to my knowledge, I don't know, but I can't say for certain that it was done before my time. I'm sure it has in some sort of iteration, and yes, to answer your question, I would like to do it again because of wanting to get better and grow and improve, right? So as far as when that will happen, I'm not too sure. I mean, that's something that I work with. I mean, it'll come out in the next communications plan as to, when that strategy will come up. But yeah, no, it was very useful. Very, again, snapshot. Like, I think the hope is that we'd like to hear from everyone, but I think we all understand just parent engagement in general at this point in time. We're lucky if we can have, 1,000 people respond. But thank you for asking.
I appreciate the work you're doing, and I do roll over a number of stories as well.
Thank you, Joe Abshire. It's a real pleasure to have you on our team, and I just value the work that you do. I know the board's already spoken how much they appreciate you, so I just want to say that the importance of transparency is just so powerful, because it's not something that our society in general is very transparent, but boy, oh boy, when you're not transparent, they sure do catch you on it. So I want to say thank you, keep up the good work, and appreciate the feedback. And maybe you give us some feedback on our presentation here tonight. So anyway. Extending. Extending. Thank you. Okay, board, back to business. I need to, I've got the motion in front of us. We've got a mover and a seconder that the Board of Education receives the update on Communications Plan 2019-2022 for information as presented. All those in favor, please. And it is carried unanimously. On to number 8, the Secretary Treasurer's Report, amended annual 5-year capital plan. Let's move over to you, Secretary Treasurer, Mr. Isley.
Thank you, Chair Ross. Just a brief update on the information that's in your package. As trustees will call, every year we get a capital plan response letter, which requires a bylaw. That was done already for the district in May at an in-camera meeting, and then released publicly in June. But also in June, as part of that response, the board decided to buy 2 electric buses of the 3 that were approved. And we set aside $200,000 from accumulated surplus to acquire that. Part of that calculation in that $200,000 was some additional grants that we would be eligible for. There are 2 grants of $30,000 each for each bus, and another $50,000 that can be used for chargers or buses. And that was incorporated in the plan. The ministry does require us to do an updated capital bylaw for the district to access those funds, and that bylaw is in your package tonight.
Thank you very much, Secretary Treasurer Isley. I need a mover and a seconder that the school district number 35 Langley Capital Plan 2021-2022 capital bylaw number 201-22-CPSD 35-02 in the amount of $2,689,627 be given first reading. A mover, please. Go ahead, Suzanne Pro, and seconded by Charlie Fox. All those in favor, please. Thank you. I'm sure there was a desire to have a conversation on that, but moving right along, we need to have all three in this meeting. So the second one, I need a mover and seconder, please, for this one. David Todd, and seconded by Marnie Wilson. Thank you very much. The School District number 35 Capital Plan 2021-2022 Capital Bylaw number 2021-22-CPSD 35-02 in the amount of $2,699,627 be given second reading. All those in favor? Gosh, that's a mouthful. And a couple more to go here. So in order to have them all in three meetings, I need to have the board's permission to have them all tonight. So I need to have 100% on this one, or it doesn't go any further, and we'd have to come back for another meeting. So I need a mover and a seconder. Moves Charlie Fox, seconded by Suzanne Pro, that the Board of Education of School District number 35 Langley approves having all three readings of the Capital Plan 2021-2022 Capital Bylaw number 2021/22-CPSD 35-02 in the amount of $2,689,627 at tonight's meeting. All those in favor? Oh, almost hold it out there. Good job. And it's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. And for the last one, I need a mover and a seconder. David Todd and Charlie Fox. Okay, thank you. That the School District number 35 Langley Capital Plan 2021/2022 Capital number 2021/22-CPSD 35-02 in the amount of $2,689,627 be given third reading, passed and adopted on the 16th day of November 2021. And all those in favor? And it's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay. Yes, sir. Oh. You have a question? It's after we passed it. Oh, you have a question? Go ahead.
Secretary, through the chair to the Secretary Treasurer, is there any update on when these buses will, I know they're kind of back ordered, but we're hoping any update on when we might receive these buses?
I hate to hazard a guess because every time I'm given a due date, they get delayed, but latest is December, January. December or January, yeah.
Okay, we have in new business, little bit of business that needs to be done. Charlie Fox is our Bcpsea representative, and he's going to take a motion and represent us this weekend. Would you like to speak to that and move your motion?
Thank you, Chair Ross. If I could make a motion, and this was circulated, that the Board of Education of School District number 35 Langley submit a request for a special resolution for the Bcpsea AGM requesting that School District 35 be moved from the Fraser Valley region to the Metro region. I so move.
It's moved by you and seconded by David Todd.
Could I speak to it? Yeah, thank you. I'm relatively new to this particular position, but I know this is something that's been worked on by Board of School Trustees in District 35 for a long time. And in the rationale, a letter dated November 5th, 2021, BC School Trustees Association stated that the BCSTA is pleased to inform you that your request to move to the Metropolitan Branch has been approved by the BCSTA Board of Directors. So following this endorsement, we wish to proceed with the next step in the process of making the move to the Metro region. And just to complement that, we received a copy of a letter today from Bob Holmes, who's the Metro Branch President, welcoming us to the Metro region. So I think that they've acknowledged that. Point two, this move will further align the regional governance structure, given that the Township of Langley and the City of Langley, which we both have schools and in our jurisdiction with, are part of the Greater Vancouver Regional District, more commonly known as Metro Vancouver. And we sit at the eastern edge of Metro Vancouver, I sat on the board of Metro Vancouver for 6 years, and we played a very instrumental role in the governance of Metro Vancouver. And I think that this regional governance structure aligns very well with the Metro structure that exists within the school district families. Number 3, within the school district of Langley, over 70% of the schools and 75% of the student enrollment are within 5 kilometers of the Surrey border on the very western edge of this district. So we do a lot of interactive things with the Surrey School District, and they're a very important partner of ours, yet we presently exist in 2 different regions. Number 4, professional learning that reflects the needs of the Board of Education is facing significant increased urbanization along the western sector of the district. I think that speaks pretty much for itself. And number 5, the move would support the long-standing request of the Board of Schools District 35 for increased salaries for school-based administration and exempt staff, and therefore make the district more competitive in the local area market. Welcome any other input.
Yes, so do any trustees have any comments, questions? Okay, first of all, Marnie Wilson, go ahead.
It would come on eventually if I just kept pushing it. Yeah, of course, I love this motion because we've all been wanting this since we became trustees. It was one of our first things, our big united move to get this done. And I was going to say I have an amendment, but obviously if it's to do with the rationale and not the motion, then it isn't really an amendment. But what I would hope as just a friendly reminder is, because if this is going to be read out at the Bcpsea AGM in January of 2022, they do include in the package the district's rationale. And so I'm hoping that the board would support us for number 5, where we have the move would support the longstanding request of the Board of SD 35 for increased salaries for school-based administration and exempt staff, and therefore make the district more competitive in the local market. If we remove the words school-based administration and exempt staff and just changed it to staff or employees, because this amendment would allow us, any staff or employees that could benefit from this change to benefit. Instead of restricting it only to administrators or exempt staff, why not be inclusive of all SD 35 employees?
Thank you.
I can just take that as a friendly adjustment in the rationale.
Yeah, there's no issue with that. There's no issue with that, I don't think. Okay, Secretary Treasurer has a comment?
A potential move to Metro would only benefit the admin staff and exempt staff. Those are the only 2 partner groups that would be affected by a move to Metro.
I understand that in the scheme of things, that's how it would appear, but I know that the different bargaining groups and the support staff, when they go to the JJEC, are different levels within their own K-12 bargaining, that they are often told that when you're in the Fraser Valley group, that your wage level, like say for SEAs, is different than Surrey because we are closer to Abbotsford because we're in the Fraser Valley. So I'm just saying, why not let any group that could benefit, whether it be within their own organizations, have the wording to just say SD 35 staff instead of pointing out exempt staff or school-based administrators. So just my opinion.
Thank you very much. Okay, the superintendent would like to challenge.
No, and it's a good point. I think what we want to do, Trustee Wilson, is certainly to put it in. What we also want to make sure is we don't set people up for an expectation I'm not sure we can meet. I'd love to, but I'm not sure of that. So that would be something that, in terms of, because I know you're right, I'd love to see all employees. I think we all would love to see all of our employees benefit from it. But we also know that Bcpsea has quite a bit of power around that in terms of stuff. So certainly putting it in, absolutely, you can always ask. I just want to caution people to not hold out that that's going to necessarily be the case. That's all.
Thank you very much. And so now down to Trustee, oh, sorry, I didn't see your hand. Yes, you can speak to it if you like. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, there we go. I think we are probably setting ourselves up. I would rather keep the language the way it is, even though I hear Trustee Wilson's point. I wouldn't want to create unintended consequences or expectations. So that's my thoughts. Anyway, I don't know. That's fine.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, comments? Yes, sir. Go ahead. Charlie Fox. Yes, close.
My colleagues, in terms of closing, we need to submit this to Bcpsea by no later than December 1st. The governance committee meets, and they will then discuss this accordingly. And then on January the 24th, I think I will be at the AGM, and I think Mr. Isley will be there, and one other lucky person, Assistant Superintendent Bunyan, will be there. So hopefully we'll be able to lobby the appropriate support. So.
Well, it is a good news story, and I see a last minute comment here. Go ahead, Trustee Pro.
My apologies. Question of curiosity coming up, bursting out of a place of ignorance. As we get adopted into the Metro, is it not already a standing policy, for lack of a better word, that all our staff would be pulled into that umbrella? So therefore, we're not setting anybody up for false expectations or setting ourselves up for failure, for lack of a better term, if we can't negotiate salaries, but that it's already there. And so to strike out exempt staff and school-based administration is really then out of our political purview to speak to. That is just for that, if it's really affecting everybody as a whole. It's just a thought. I don't know if I'm correct on it, and I would need to have that adjusted accordingly.
Thank you. Secretary Isley, would you like to respond, please?
The only grids that Bcpsea publishes that are based on region with Metro and Fraser Valley are for the administrators and the exempt staffs. Those are the two grids that are published as part of those different organizations. There is no grid that I'm aware of for any other partner or your labor group.
So when other labor groups go to negotiation, they're not
it's all done on provincial bargaining, and they basically are adding percentages on top of existing grids that have always existed. That's how it has traditionally happened. That's how I understand things. I have never seen a Metro or a Fraser Valley grid for anything other than those entities.
Okay, thank you. So we've got a mover and a seconder. So all those in favor of the motion, I've got the motion ahead. The Board of Education School District number 35 Langley submitted a request for a special resolution for the Bcpsea AGM requesting that the school district number 35 be moved from the Fraser Valley region to the Metro region. All those in favor, please. We're on to trustee comments at this point. So I thought we'd start at the top this time. So I'll let David Todd go ahead for first.
Thank you. I did want to talk a little bit tonight about honor, because I wanted to say in closing tonight, it was an honor to serve this board as vice chair. I really appreciated the chance. I certainly, well, I can't speak for everybody here, but we are imperfect people working in an imperfect position and doing our very best. And I can say that, every night that we come here, that's what we're doing. We're trying to make the best decisions going. So I appreciated that. I appreciate the chance to be vice chair. And thank you so much for the support of all the trustees around this table as I navigated those difficult waters. Yeah, thank you. And speaking of honor, I was struck by the Langley Advance Times, and there's an article about Jordan Worrell he's a scout, and he's a scout that took on the difficult task of cleaning off the headstones of our vets that are in our cemeteries. And he did the one just over here, not far from here in Murrayville. And I thought, yeah, it's a difficult task. But all too often, we think the youth are, they're far away from this thing or that. But I thought, what is a more beautiful example of honor and service to your community than something like that? Right before Remembrance Day, these scouts took this on, and they went around to not just one, but several cemeteries and cleaned up the headstones. So thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Suzanne Perot, please.
I want to extend my deepest appreciation to Trustee Todd for his time serving us, for bearing down and lifting up under very difficult circumstances, conversations with humility and honor and integrity, and finding your way through in the middle of it all. I thank you for leading us and holding the course. And I thank you for serving our community as a byproduct. You're not leaving the table, you're leaving a role, and I congratulate Trustee Wilson in her new role. I'm excited for you. I'm excited for your opportunity to come forward and to grow and to speak into our board and our leadership and where we can go and how we do that. And we got 10 amazing months ahead of us and more meetings. I'm counting. I'm excited for our new superintendent and grieving our old superintendent and our older. Grieving our older. Sorry, usually I'm okay with words. I'm just gonna. Thank you for your grace, Gord. And yeah, I'm looking forward to our transition and our changes with much anticipation and excitement with the visions that are coming towards us. I'm absolutely excited and energized by it, actually. And that's really all I have to say tonight. So have a good night.
Thank you very much, Trustee Perot. And now on to Trustee Tony Ward, please.
I'd just like to thank the partner groups for watching and all those tens of thousands of people online. Congratulations to Trustee Wilson. Thank you, Trustee Fox and Wilson, for both accepting nominations. Thank you for Trustee Todd there. And that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now to Trustee Barney Wilson, our new Vice Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, all our support staff and everybody watching at home. I just wanted to start with saying I was honored to attend a beautiful Remembrance Day service with Trustee Fox at the Aldergrove Legion, and I want to thank them for putting on that amazing service. I want to thank Trustee Todd for his service to this board and being vice chair for us. And I know we're not an easy board to work with, so anybody in those roles has a lot to do. I want to thank Trustee Fox for putting his name forward too and running. And I just want to say that thank you to my colleagues at the table for electing me, and I will try not to let you down.
Thank you very much. And now on to Trustee Fox, please.
Thank you. Yes, congratulations to Trustee Wilson for her election. That's the way it good. We had a great conversation the other day, so all is good. And thank you to Trustee Todd for his service. He was a great help for me when I was preparing for the by-election. And yes, we attended Remembrance Day together at Aldergrove. Kind of, it was bittersweet in many ways. There wasn't a lot of people there. It was very well organized as usual. But the other bittersweet piece of that, and I always look forward to this, is the Fraser Blues will no longer be flying. And I know My colleague Trustee Ward, his father was very instrumental in the formation of the Fraser Blues, and they've been such an emblematic piece of Remembrance Day in our local cemeteries where the acknowledgement has gone on, ceremonies, but in other communities as well. So that's sad. And lastly, yes, you did do extending jobs today, and you can pass that on to Mr. Kozlovic as well. Thank you very much to our staff. They truly are exemplary, and the work you're doing is really appreciated. So thank you very much. And just a quick comment to Trustee Perot. I will not grieve the loss of Superintendent Stewart. I might do something else about it, but I won't grieve it. I might tip a glass to it. I might do something. No.
And
in my notes to congratulate incoming Vice Chair Wilson. So I do apologize. That was in, I didn't get to.
you know, it's an exciting board, and I'm excited about having a new team member in this new role. So I'm sad to see you go, but you know, I know this is going to be good for us. I'm expecting good things from you, no pressure. I just want to encourage everyone to be readers, because we know readers are leaders. And so this is a book that has really influenced me. So board members, I might even buy you one. But this is just fabulous. It's the story of Netflix, right? And but the learning that comes out of this that we can all apply to our lives is just world class. So I just want to say thank you for the team. Thank you for our staff that have once again presented a great technical presentation. I'm sure that the public appreciates it. And I just want to say how much I really love this gig. And we're going to miss you, Superintendent, but we still got another month before you leave us. So we'll let you have the final word next month. But I just want to say thank you, staff. Thank you for all of you for your great work. And those that are watching on television, etc. And we really appreciate all of the people that make this thing happen for our students. We've just gone through a great weather catastrophe in many ways, and districts have had to shut down schools, the whole districts. But we've managed to keep ours open. I'm very grateful for that. And so that just goes to show you that we've got good people making good decisions in this district. So thank you very much. On to the last part of our meeting, question period. Let me just read this out. If you be patient with me, please. Due to the fact that the public will be using an online platform for this regular board meeting, the process for question period is as follows. The board will not be taking questions from members of the public in real time. We encourage members of the public to please submit their questions by emailing feedback@sd35.bc.ca. Questions will be accepted up to 1 hour after the adjournment of the meeting. Board members or an appropriate staff will respond to the individual directly to acknowledge that they've received the email within 24 hours. Thereafter, a response will be provided to the individual. The purpose is to ensure that those present in the audience have an opportunity to obtain clarification concerning business conducted during that meeting. Priority will be given to responding to one question per person before considering further questions from any individual. The following is to help the public develop questions for question period at a board meeting that is in keeping with the goal of a respectful and focused meeting. Questions. Number one, they need to be directed to the chair and not to staff. Need to be related directly to the topic on the agenda. Need to be succinct, focused, and not be a statement. May not be asked that are related to personnel or directed at an individual trustee. May not be asked that are related to contract negotiations. And 6, the questioner shall provide their name so that they can be reflected in the minutes. All of the above are directions provided for in policy number 7, board operations. The chair may answer, may defer to staff, or indicate a question may not be in keeping with the above guidelines. The board appreciates the public's interest and wants to ensure a professional meeting is conducted with question period focused on providing guests with the clarification they seek. Trustees also welcome questions from members of the public apart from the question period. Their contact information is available on the school district website. Chair called for questions from the public. May I call for adjournment? David Todd, seconded by Trustee Fox. All those in favor? Thank you. And the time is now 9 o'clock. Thank you very much. It is unanimous.